Hello everyone and welcome back to Story of the World Highlights. Today we'll be discussing chapter 16. Now chapter 16 is all about the period of Enlightenment in the West, specifically in Europe. And we're going to be looking at this time of enlightenment, this time of new ideas, and what was causing all these new ideas and the effect that they had not only then, but now. So let's take a look. So we first start off with philosophers and scientists discovering the scientific method. So philosophers and scientists, just like Galileo, were all about using the scientific method to make observations and conclusions about how things work. So again, the scientific method is a method of using observations and data to form conclusions. And so famously, we know about Sir Isaac Newton, and Sir Isaac Newton used these methods to discover gravity and the laws of gravity, knowing that famous story about the apple falling down, that it fell down because of this force in Earth pulling it down. Now, Sir Isaac Newton identified the universal laws that govern objects. And other scientists and philosophers were wondering if these universal laws could also explain the way that people should be governed and how people work. So lots of people at the time were exploring this. And specifically, we also have another philosopher and scientist, John Locke, who was really looking at this. Now, before I go into talking about John Locke, we should also note that the period in which this is happening is at the same time that Charles II was coming back to England, as we recently read about. This was also the time of James II, remember, the man that was a little too Catholic for the English, and during the time of William and Mary, who came back into England and started what the current form of government in England is, which is a constitutional monarchy. And again, a constitutional monarchy just means that Parliament makes the laws that even the kings and queens have to follow. So this was a whole new period of change. The idea of absolute monarchy was very quickly disappearing, or at least being challenged. Now, going specifically to John Locke was using this idea of universal laws, and he thought that people were all created equal, and that we were all born blank, and our experience shaped who we are, and that this applied to kings as well. And if this applied to kings, then that challenges the idea that God picked them and they were born special. Locke believed that everybody had inalienable rights, and those inalienable, which just means permanent, rights included life, liberty, freedom, and the right to own things, possessions. I ran out of space, so it just says stuff. Now, he also in 1689, which is a little bit different than the date they say in the book, but in 1689, he published a book called The Two Treatises of Government. Now, the Two Treatises of Government was one of John Locke's big ideas that really shaped things. And this idea was about the separation of power. He believed that we should have the legislator, which makes the laws, and we should have the executor, which enforces the laws and makes sure people are doing them. Now, this separation of power he thought was important because if one person was doing both jobs, they might make mistakes. They might not do it fairly. And so he really believed that there should be a separation. It's very similar to what William Penn was thinking about in the last chapter, where there should be 3 types of government in William Penn's opinion. And all of this is about the separation of government and making sure that there is checking of power, making sure that everybody is doing their job and doesn't have too much power in one area. Again, this is the modern day checks and balances, but those ideas were first brought about during this age of enlightenment by people like William Penn and John Locke. Now, he also believed in something called the social contract, and the social contract said that these rules that we decide that govern a community should be voted on by the people. They should be agreed upon by the people, so a contract. And he thought that this contract, if the government, the ruler in charge, does not follow through with the contract, if they don't follow the rules, then the people should be allowed to kick them out of power and change them. Now, this is a really radical and new idea because Does that mean if people don't like what the king has to say, or if the king is being too greedy and selfish, that the people can kick him out and he can lose power? We'll start to discover this as well as other things during this period of enlightenment.